So I wanted to talk a little bit about the evolution of consciousness, and I'm going to frame it in terms of these various structures that really a lot of researchers have talked about, but that Jean Gebser in particular, I think, worked out these structures in a way that is especially important and especially insightful. And he's influenced a lot of other thinkers, William Irwin Thompson, Ken Wilber, George Feuerstein, probably others that slip my mind at the moment. And I think each of these other thinkers has a unique way of interpreting what Gebser is actually saying. I prefer Thompson's interpretation. I think it does better justice to what could be called the mythopoeic imagination, and really allows us to integrate magic and mythic structures of consciousness, which would be, historically, or perhaps prehistorically, just in terms of linear time, the magic and the mythic are prior to our current age, where we are in the mental, and Gebser would call it the deficient mental or the rational phase of the evolution of consciousness. And I call it an evolution, and for Gebser that would be not really a problematic term to use, so long as we didn't interpret evolution in a sort of Darwinist way, the biological way, or in the sense that it was some sort of an unambiguous progression towards better and better ways of being conscious. Because for Gebser, evolution is both, it's a change, and it's also a sort of, what would you call it? A mutation, and it's a movement away from origin as much as it is a movement towards origin. And for Gebser, origin is like it is where time and eternity meet and are transparent. And for him, that's the ultimate spiritual moment or realization. The transparency of time is another way of putting it. The diaphaneity of time, that's origin. And the evolution of consciousness is a movement both towards and away from this ever-present moment. It's ever-present, and so never really something we're lacking or moving away from or, proceeding towards. And yet, it seems that we, especially in the mental, rational phase in the evolution of consciousness, in this particular historical moment, it seems as if we really are separate from origin, as if we've lost touch with our spiritual roots and become alienated, both from nature and from our own inner divinity. That's somewhat distracting, but it's pretty funny too. Anyways, yeah, you don't even know what I'm talking about. Some ladies waving at me, and me looking like a fool talking to myself. But hey, they seem to like it. But evolution of consciousness, as I was saying, I want to say a little bit about the magic and the mythic structures in particular, because in the rational structure of consciousness, the deficient mental, and this is all Gebser's terminology, we would interpret magic and mythic as both sort of defunct and obsolete ways of understanding that need to be sort of dispensed with, outgrown, and that's a big one. It's sort of thought of as morally weak to take myth and magic seriously, or whatever that might mean. And I think taking it seriously doesn't mean that you believe literally in miracles or events which take place that are in contradiction with what we know to be physical laws, natural laws. But what would it mean then to take mythic and magic structures seriously, well, I think for one thing, it would mean that we would no longer see them as archaic or sort of primitive ways of being in the world. In fact, they're quite intelligent and nuanced and complex. And not only that, I would say that, and I'm agreeing with Gebser here, paraphrasing him actually, that the magic and the mythic are still active and present in mental consciousness, in logical thinking, in scientific thinking. Science is an outgrowth, a direct outgrowth of the Christian mythos, of the incarnation of God into nature and into the human in particular, so that we might have the rational soul capable of understanding nature and having technological dominion over nature. No Christianity, no science. Really, why didn't China develop empirical science and technological science like the West? Well, because it was something very particular about our religious past and our way of mythologizing our experience that led us to value the sorts of knowledge and practice that science leads to. Gebser sort of shows how, in a way that I can't really do justice to here off the cuff, but it shows how the logos, or the word, this mythic being, or spiritual being, became logic, and that to think logically is really to have internalized the logos or awoken to the voice of the logos within oneself. And so revelation is no longer something out there received from a church or a prophet, but in fact revelation becomes your own reason, your own free thinking ability, your ability to understand the world from the inside out. That is to have internalized the logos. And so in that sense, myth makes possible logic and science, and rationality, so-called. But for Gebser, rationality has a sort of negative connotation because it implies dualism, ratio, and for him, whatever integral consciousness is, it's able to overcome that dualism and to see transparently through each of the structures from magic to mythic to mental, and to sort of allow them to function as a whole rather than favoring one or another. So I think I'll leave it at that, and I encourage disagreement, contradiction, and responses of any sort, really. Even if you just want to continue developing these ideas with me, I would love it. So thanks for listening.